I am still hustling, and I have worked extremely hard, long hours. There's been sacrifices, time away from my family, but it's a little bit of both. But there's a lot of sweat, sweat equity in my 100%. Business, and I didn't just wake up and have this dream and it just came true.
Right. Hello and welcome to the 2020 podcast, bringing clarity to business, entrepreneurship, and life. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode. Don't forget to share this wherever you can, guys. If you're listening on a podcast or if you're watching this on YouTube, take a little screenshot, throw it up on Instagram and tag me. I'd love to see what you guys are doing and what you liked about this episode. And I'm super, super excited about this episode. I have one of the absolute nicest people I've ever met in my life right here next to me. But not only is she the nicest person, she is an extremely successful and she's just a boss lady, basically, at the end of the day. Let me just get into what she actually does. This is my wonderful friend, Aly Armstrong, who is a luxury event planner. She also hosts her own podcast called the Almost Married Podcast and is a creator of a luxury wedding show in Vancouver called Fleur, which is hosted at the lovely JW Marriott in downtown Vancouver. So, thank you so much, Aly, for joining us. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me and asking me to be on your podcast.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure.
And likewise, you are incredible and so nice. So thank you for that kind of intro.
You're welcome. It was well-deserved. So, Aly, I like to usually start by asking kind of where you started. Where did you grow up and where you went to school and all these things. And we'll definitely get into all the exciting stuff that you've done over the years.
So I grew up in a very small town in Ontario, in cottage country, essentially. It's called the city of Kawartha Lakes, which is northeast of Toronto. Okay. Very small town. It was lovely. It was a quiet kind of upbringing. Spent, our summers on the boat, but quiet being, the main word, because I always felt like there was a little bit more to life. My parents were from the city, but they moved to the country for peace and quiet, but they would still commute to the city for work. So they encouraged me to explore once I graduated high school, which I'm super appreciative of, because not a lot of people are given that opportunity or encouraged. So I ended up going to college in California.
Oh, wow.
And I went to Santa Monica College and I studied broadcast journalism. And I did that for a couple of years. I guess I should maybe rewind.
Yeah.
Because my main motivation also for going to California is I was a childhood actor, essentially.
Well, there's an important piece of information.
Yeah. Okay. It's not usually something I lead with, but if I'm sharing my story, it is a piece of my story. So I started off very young age doing commercials, episodics. And then when I was 14, I really got a lot of momentum in the industry, did a couple of movies, and I was the lead in MTV's first original movie.
Wow.
I'm not even going to say the name.
You were the lead in the first movie that MTV produced.
The first original MTV movie.
You're not going to tell us
I'm not going to tell you the name.
Somebody go Google it and then tell me what it is.
But what was so surreal about that is because I was from a small town, I was naive. I did it because I loved it, not because I was after any sort of fame. But when I got a little bit older, I kind of looked back, and luckily my parents had saved like newspaper clippings and everything of my time in the industry. And I realized this movie I was on a billboard on Sunset Boulevard.
Crazy. Wow.
I was on the back of Variety magazine, but I was so young that I had no idea. I didn't know even what Sunset Boulevard was then or what Variety magazine was. So I didn't comprehend how lucky I was in that moment. I loved it and enjoyed it, but it wasn't until I was a little bit older that I could look back and appreciate, that experience. So
it's funny how that happens. I think that happens to everybody, right? Like you look back and you say, man, 10 years ago I did that. How cool.
Yes.
But that's on a whole different level of being on a billboard on Sunset Boulevard. That's at that age. That was age 14.
Cool. I was 15 and a half by the time that happened. And then I got signed to a really big agent in LA. Wow. They repped literally the top movie stars in the industry. But my parents put a stop to it because the agency wanted me to move there. My parents said, no, you need to finish high school, and education is important.
Yeah.
So they kind of hit stop. So I took a couple of years off because it was interrupting. Even if I was working in Toronto, I was having to work with a tutor on set, and it just they weren't that thrilled with that experience for me. Yeah. And I was still a minor, so they had every right to make that decision.
Well, yeah, they had the final
on my
call,
behalf. Yeah. So I took a pause. And then when I turned 18, went to LA, and I did study though. I took broadcast journalism, lived in the UCLA dorm, which was insane, on frat row. It was like quintessential American college experience.
It is what we see in the movies?
It is exactly what you see in the movies, that's honestly.
Cool. It's good and bad.
Yes, right? Yes. I'm not going to share all the stories, but it was a fun experience. And then, it was a little bit difficult trying to be an actress and being Canadian in the U.S.
Really? What effect did that have?
I didn't have an O1 visa, which is what an entertainer needs to work in the U.S., and it was really difficult to get one. Essentially, a big studio would have had to hire me and sponsor me. But by this time, 2 years have passed since I've done that big movie. I still have an agent, not the same agent. And it was really difficult. There's so many people in LA trying to do the same thing. Yeah. So there's a lot of competition. So I focused on my studies. And then when I was 20, I decided to take one last crack at it. So I auditioned through the summer break, and I landed a TV show.
That's amazing. And it's probably one that a lot of people will recognize.
It might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let you share it. Yeah, please.
It was the Power Rangers.
Amazing. Who hasn't seen the Power Rangers? I'm pretty sure people around our age group, a few years higher and lower, older and younger, because there were many generations of Power Rangers.
Yeah, there are.
So here, guys, we have the Pink Ranger.
I was the Pink Power Ranger.
Yes. So tell us a bit about that experience.
So we filmed in New Zealand for a year. Every year, the Power Rangers changes the cast and changes the theme. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. And even when I landed the job, I had no idea the Power Rangers was still filming. I watched it as a child, of course. Like the original Pink Power Ranger, Kimberly, was like my idol as a kid. But I think now it's been going on for 25 years. And so I was season 14. Oh, wow. That kind of says a lot about my age now. But so we filmed for a year in New Zealand. It was an incredible experience. Just lived the life, had so much fun. The nice thing was the show didn't air in New Zealand. It was one of the only countries in the world that did not air the Power Rangers because of the violence.
Oh, wow.
Yes. It's a very...
The big boxy robots and stuff?
I know.
Right.
But it was nice because no one bothered us. We were filming all over the city, and just no one could care less. No one knew what the show was. So we got to just live freely in a normal life, and had a lot of fun that year.
That's awesome.
And
so you lived a full year, like 365 days straight in New Zealand.
Yes, I did take a couple of weeks and traveled around New Zealand, the North and South Islands, which are amazing. If anyone hasn't been to New Zealand, bucket list. Right. It was a spectacular place to visit.
Looks like it.
Really is. It's like Jurassic Park, and then there's like black sand beaches and white sand beaches, and then the South Island's very different than the North Island. Just amazing destination.
That's awesome.
I did come home for Christmas, but other than that, I was there for the full year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And overall, a great experience, would you say? It's
great experience. Okay. Absolutely. And, after I filmed the show, I never shared it. I never led with, I am an actress or I was a Power Ranger. It wasn't until recently kind of everything came full circle, because I have young boys that love the Power Rangers, and I can't believe I'm about to share this, but you can watch my series on Netflix.
Oh, no way. On Netflix? It's on Netflix?
It's on Netflix.
I'm going to go catch that.
I'm so oversharing right now, but my boys watch it, and they just think it's the coolest thing.
Oh man, that makes you even more like of an idol to them, I imagine.
Well, it's funny because they're, they think that I am like this strong, like powerful woman because they watch me kick some ass.
Yeah.
But it's cool for them to see that,
Yeah.
and I've become more proud of that experience.
That's amazing.
Watching it, through their eyes.
I got you.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
It's been
very
fun.
cool. I remember the first time I learned that about you. I was like, what? No way, that's so cool. I wanted an autograph, but I played it cool.
It's like my party trick.
Yeah, no kidding. Speaking of autographs, so like, do you? How does this Pink Power Ranger thing still come into play these days? Do people recognize you, or do you go to events, or how does this work?
There is a crazy fan base for the Power Rangers. It's an amazing group of fans, like millions of them.
Wow.
I would compare it, probably not as large, but it's comparable to like the Star Trek fans or the Star Wars fans.
Like,
there's a very loyal
gotcha.
following. So every year around the world, there are multiple conventions that are specifically Power Ranger conventions. So
wow,
I do
like
it
a Comic-Con, but just
kind of
for
like a Comic-Con, but just for Power Rangers.
Wow.
And sometimes there are opportunities to attend, like Comic-Cons around the world. They bring in a few Power Rangers to join, whoever else is there. So I do get invited to attend these conventions. I typically go maybe once every 2 years.
Okay.
Just works a little bit busy, but I can say, there's 25 years worth of Power Rangers in this world, and a lot of them still make their living off of going to
They make a living off of this?
Conventions.
Wow.
Yes, because they get paid to attend these conventions.
But
and
enough that you can,
they make
I guess
a
they attend
living
a couple
out
of
of
years,
it. Like a handful. Some go, like, there is literally probably one a month around the world.
Many.
It's insane. So every 2 years, I'll go to
Very cool.
one of the main ones, which is in California, which is cool to connect with the fan base. And now I would say my original fans are adults, but they watched me when they were younger. But the fan base ranges everywhere from little kids all the way up to, like, honestly, like 60-year-old people. Like,
I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but does that get a little... Okay.
It's interesting. There's an interesting, there's definitely some interesting experiences.
I imagine. All right, well,
anyway,
that's so cool, because I'm hoping I get to interview some pretty cool people over the period of this podcast, but I don't know if anybody's going to have that. Nobody's going to be able to trump Pink Power Ranger.
Everyone's got their own thing.
Everybody's got their own thing, but nobody's got Pink Power Ranger. All right, so what happened after Power Rangers? You came back to Vancouver.
So I went back to LA initially, and then I was set to go to Ryerson University and continue broadcast journalism. And I was going to drive from California to Toronto, and I had two friends that I met filming the Power Rangers that lived in Vancouver.
Wow.
So I decided I was going to drive through Canada. I'd never seen my own country. I always drove from Toronto to LA through the US.
Yeah, right.
So I stopped in LA. I sublet an apartment for a month. It's the month of June, and I was just going to spend 1 month in Vancouver and then head back to Toronto, and I never left.
Wow.
And that was 12 years ago.
That's so cool.
I got to Vancouver, looked around, and thought, wow, like the mountains, the ocean, it reminded me of California a lot. And I was never a huge fan of Ontario. I mean, I love my family. I love, the cottage country in the summertime. It was just very flat and quiet.
Sure.
And I fell in love with British Columbia. So I stayed, and then I completely switched my career path and decided to attend the Art Institute of Vancouver and took the event management and PR program.
Right.
And then found my way into the event industry.
That's amazing.
So
how do you go from starting out, you just decide you want to go into this space, to becoming Aly Armstrong? Like, that name holds weight. Trust me, guys. So how do you become this sought after luxury wedding planner? Yeah. How long ago was that now?
2007 is when I graduated.
Got it.
So what I always recommend to younger kind of entrepreneurs or people just graduating school is to volunteer and to get involved with their specific community. It's not necessarily that easy to just jump in and start your own business with no experience. So I took contracts with several different companies, like Chip Wilson. I helped him on the
Lululemon founder.
The Lululemon founder on the Chip's Not Dead Yet Memorial Mile is a charity run he used to produce that benefited the BC Children's Hospital. I worked with the David Suzuki Foundation, and then I got involved in smaller like corporate events and weddings, but that was all through contacts I made through school and after school. And then after I had about 3 years experience in the event industry, I decided to start my own business.
Awesome.
Yeah, and
it's still fairly quick, like 3 years in.
It was quick, but luckily through schooling, because I did put myself out there, I got to know people quite quickly.
Yeah.
I showed up at events and networked, met some great people that offered me some amazing opportunities. So I felt like I had some really great experience under my belt. With that being said, I still had a lot to learn, and I still am learning.
Right.
But at the time, I also did events for a leadership development company. And the CEO of that company, who is still my mentor today, is the one that actually encouraged me to start my own business and to jump in with both feet. Because he said, I sense that you're super passionate about this. Yeah. And, if you do want to see the momentum and the growth, you need to jump in and give it your all, because you can't create, I had shared my vision and my dream. He's like, you're not going to be able to create that if you're still, if you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You need to go for it. Yeah. So he kind of gave me the push that I needed to start my business. So
that's amazing. And this morning, actually, just this morning, I read a quote from, I love Robin Sharma. And so I read a quote from him that was, the secret to happiness is to find what you love and then just go all in on that thing. And that's exactly what you did. It's amazing. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it worked for me because I am passionate about what I do. And I knew very quickly that I was in the right industry and that I had found my calling.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So one thing I wanted to ask you was, now, because you do, I use the word luxury. And that's an important word to use here because you, I assume, consciously made that decision that you were going to work with a certain type of clientele, offer a certain type of a service.
Yes.
A lot of people, including myself, would be afraid to make that choice because there's a smaller number of people you can work with, obviously, that could afford that service. So how do you have the confidence to say, I'm not going to be your average, middle of the road, type person. I'm going to aim for this. Mm-hmm. How would you say you came to that?
I was fortunate early in that I had a couple of acquaintances that, in the wedding world anyways, that were getting married and that hired me, and they had incredible budgets, and I'm passionate about design. So I'm very heavily involved in the aesthetics and the design of any project that I do. So I was fortunate to be able to get creative and produce a couple of amazing weddings.
That's awesome.
And knew that the design was super important to my business and to me. And in order to create kind of, bigger, beautiful productions, you have to have budget. Right. So I did learn early in that that's where I wanted my focus to be, and also that it wasn't about necessarily the number of events I did every year. I wanted to make sure the events that I was involved with, I felt excited about. I'm going to do my best work if I'm happy and passionate about what I'm doing. And it's really like whether you're doing a small event or a large scale event, there's still essentially the same number of hours involved in the project. You might put a little bit more attention into the design and the details, but I realized that in order to get compensated essentially for the amount of hours I was putting into every single project, that the luxury market was just more beneficial and offered more of an opportunity for me to scale and grow, and just I felt passionate being in that space.
Yeah, and I've heard that from a few different people, right? And in different industries who've chosen the path of going that luxury or higher tier or whatever term you want to use, going that route because, yes, maybe it's harder in the beginning because you have to prove you're worth that, but ultimately you're getting appropriately compensated for what you're doing. And ultimately you have to, like I was saying, you have to prove that you're capable of that. And you mentioned how much you care about design. And I know that because I've seen it, because at Fleur, you had that giant Eiffel Tower built, right? How tall was this thing?
It's 15 feet tall by 22 feet wide.
Crazy. It was cool to see, guys. And it was metal?
Partly steel and wood. Funny, just to tie everything together, is the executive producer of the Power Rangers made that for me.
Oh, no way.
He is actually a big set designer now. He works for huge companies like Minecraft's, like Spielberg. Like, he does set design, and he's an artist. And I had this vision for the fashion show component at Fleur for the models to walk through an Eiffel Tower. I dreamt it, and I woke up and went, wow, how can I make that happen? And I thought of, his name's Greg, right away. And I gave him a call, and I said, I have this crazy vision and this crazy idea. And he's like, send me a sketch. I'll make it for you.
That's awesome.
And so he made that. And he lives in LA, and I had no idea how to get this thing here because he's an artist. So he's not he's not that organized where he can send me all of, like, it was in multiple pieces. So he couldn't send me the weight and the dimensions. So I couldn't get a shipping quote. Right. I was worried, is it going to get to the show in time? Yeah. So I flew to LA, rented a U-Haul, and drove that thing back. Wow. And now
I knew you had some logistical issue. I had no idea that's what you had to go through.
That's what I went through to get that there. But, you know, if you have a dream, I mean, anything's possible if you 100%. Put your mind to it. 100%. Like, no matter what industry you're in.
That's so cool. I love that. So that's the kind of lengths that you have to go to sometimes to make sure you can bring your vision to life.
Absolutely.
So Aly Armstrong, as an event planner and now your wedding show, you're also part of an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization.
Yes.
And you're quite involved here in Vancouver.
I am.
Can you tell us about what that is about?
Yeah, I'm the executive director of the Entrepreneurs Organization in Vancouver. It's a global organization. There's over 150 chapters worldwide. Oh, okay. It's a membership organization. So anyone, you know, we have a chapter in most major cities around the world. So there are a few qualifying factors to become a part of the organization, but it is a member-based community. It's an incredible network of entrepreneurs. I've learned so much the last 3 years since I've been involved with them. We have 170 members in Vancouver alone.
Awesome.
And they have like a wide range of businesses. So you don't have to be in a specific industry. Yeah. As long as you're an entrepreneur, you are either a founder or a majority shareholder of a business. Then you could qualify if your business meets the minimum revenue qualification. But we do a lot of learning, networking. I get to travel with them. We go to global leadership conferences around the world. Yeah. I meet other entrepreneurs from around the world. And I think the funnest for me thing that's come out of that organization is if I'm traveling to any city, any country in the world, I have a network.
Yeah, well, that's true because they have chapters everywhere.
They have chapters everywhere. So I can reach out to their chapter president or executive director if I need restaurant recommendations or hotel recommendations. And in places like the Philippines chapter is so nice. Oh, that's awesome. They are amazing.
Well, Filipino people in general are so nice.
So nice. And so they've offered, like, come to the Philippines, like, I'll send my driver to pick you up and you can stay at my hotel. And it's just crazy the amount of people that you get to meet through this organization. But also the learning, you know, the speakers that I get to hear and learn from has helped me in my business and personally. The personal development has been wonderful.
Yeah. That's incredible. Well, that's something that, I mean, we've all heard, but something that I like to really talk about in whatever form on Instagram or wherever, chat with people about is, you know, all of those things that you kind of touched on with EO that you get, the mentorship, you know, I mean, the simplest thing is like the 5 people you spend most time with. But I mean, if you think about it in the big picture, in general, the type of people you spend time with really influences your growth. So if you're around successful people and people who are trying to grow and then you can learn from them, that's the absolute best position to be in for long-term success.
Yeah, like-minded individuals. And also, you know, I'm relatively like new in business. And, you know, within the organization, there are men and women that have been in business for like a long time. They're now in their 60s, 70s, started at a very young age.
Right.
So a lot of the entrepreneurs have, if I'm in I have a stuck point, or I have a question, or, I need somebody to experience share. There's just so many at my fingertips that can share their experience, and in hopes I don't make either the same mistake, or I, get connected to the right person that can help me through that.
Yeah.
So I think just, whether you're a part of an organization, or you just come together with people in your own community or amongst your friends, I think it is important to, as an entrepreneur, to have other entrepreneur
absolutely
contacts.
Yeah. And that, again, just to kind of reiterate that same point, like trying to spend time around people who are going to help you grow, find those people. Sometimes it's a bit uncomfortable because you have to go out of your comfort zone, but try to join an organization, whether it's entrepreneurs organization or something else along that line, where you can network and get people to mentor you.
Definitely.
And of course, you're going to come across people who have been through what you're going through, maybe in a different form, but there's lessons that you can learn there.
Absolutely.
So recently, I think, was it just last year, you launched your own podcast?
I did, in January of this year.
Oh, this year.
It was, I launched it right around Fleur, actually.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. So I did launch the podcast. I had the idea last year. I just had to make sure I had the time to execute it. And I finally, made it a priority and launched it a few months ago.
And it's amazing. And you've had how many episodes now?
12.
12 episodes.
Yeah.
And so once again, the name of the podcast is
It's Almost Married, Everything You Need to Know to Plan Your Dream Wedding.
There you go. Okay.
That's the longer name. But I chat with other industry professionals just about the wedding planning process. So it's geared towards couples obviously planning their wedding.
Right.
Providing insight, sharing tips, sharing experiences, anything from the editor-in-chief of Wedding Bells magazine about like trends to diamonds to we talk about etiquette. There's awesome. A lot of different topics that we've touched on.
Anybody out there I'll say anybody out there who's getting married anytime soon, check it out. So I'm already married, but I listen to it anyway. And I actually was able to take like the one on fitness or exercise. Useful for me. Like there's stuff in there if you want to kind of nitpick at things, but anybody who is looking to get married, definitely listen into Aly's podcast.
Thanks, Herbert.
Really, really well produced. Sort of a high target for me to aim at. I told Aly when we were starting that I'm kind of just starting out, getting the ball rolling, and one day maybe we'll be producing the audio the way that you're doing it.
Again, it's just the only way I'm like lucky. I have a studio that I'm able to record in because I have a friend that is in the radio industry.
Right.
So really, it doesn't matter how you get there. You're doing it. You're doing an amazing job. And I'm just lucky that I have the convenience of being able to use this friend's studio, but it's been a fun experience.
Well, actually, I want to just, as we get closer to wrapping up here, one, I feel like common theme through all of this is that you've had good people around you. And that doesn't, sometimes you're lucky and you're just, your best friend from kindergarten is someone famous and they help you out. But a lot of the time, those are connections and friendships that you have to build by being a good person and giving back in a relationship and making sure that you reached out to the producer of Power Rangers, which you did how many years ago? Sorry?
12
years ago. And he was willing to build you this. I'm sure he was compensated in some form, but like he was willing to spend the time to build this giant Eiffel Tower, right, for you to use at your show. I don't know how many people can call someone they knew 12 years ago and ask for them to do a big job like that, right? So pretty cool that you've done that. And I think that's a really important takeaway out of all of this.
Thank you. Yes, I nurture friendships. It's very important to me. And you mentioned kindness. That's something that's very important to me is, I treat people how I would want to be treated. And I've come across people in business that, that's not an important factor for them, and that's their life. But it is important for me to have those awesome people and nurture those relationships. And, also I adopted a motto that I'm defined by what I say no to. And it's helped me be a little bit more specific and targeted with the clients that I do work with. And I just want to make sure that I maintain that passion and that enjoyment, in business and in life.
Right.
And it helps achieve a little bit more of a work-life balance.
Right. That ever elusive work-life balance we're all trying to get. Well, and that, thank you again for saying yes to this. Then, with all that you have to be conscious of the amount of commitments that you take, obviously. So once again, thank you so much. So to wrap up, I like to ask a couple of questions to all the guests, and that is number one, if you could go back to, let's say, the time when you just before you got the Power Rangers gig and you weren't so sure about the acting, and you were, if you could speak to your younger self at that time, what would you say, some kind of encouragement or something else that you might tell yourself at that time?
I would definitely encourage myself to just enjoy every minute of every day. Soak up the experiences. Be grateful for the place, that I'm in currently. And everything always works out the way it's supposed to. But the one thing I feel as kind of a grown adult now is I didn't necessarily appreciate every moment or every experience that I was in that moment. I definitely appreciate it now, but I would have loved, I think, to just have soaked it in a little bit more and felt that truly kind of grateful feeling for the position that I was in that moment. And I do, because I did learn that lesson, I do live by that today.
Good.
And even if things go wrong, I learn from my mistakes. I'm human. That's how I think one does evolve as a person, as an entrepreneur. Just don't make the same mistake twice.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So living with gratitude, definitely very, very important. And the final question is, with everything that you've achieved, the on the acting side, on the planning and design side, and now with the podcast and everything else, how much of that would you say is luck, and how much of that is hard work?
Wow, that's a really tough question. I would say I have hustled. So
good. Yeah, absolutely.
It did not come easy.
Right.
There was a little bit of luck, and I know it's cliche, but a little bit of luck with preparation is how
that's success, right?
Success. But I am still hustling, and I have worked extremely hard, long hours. There's been sacrifices, time away from my family, but it's a little bit of both. But there's a lot of sweat, sweat equity in my 100%. Business, and I didn't just wake up and have this dream and it just came true.
Right.
I definitely though was laser focused and had a business plan and a goal. But more importantly, I do 90-day goals.
Okay.
And that has helped me achieve the greater
goal,
and I'm working towards, an even, bigger picture.
Amazing.
But
I'm excited
that
for
90-day plan has worked well for me. And even, I don't know if you're familiar with the one, page personal plan. It's,
maybe not so much.
Yeah, it's something that anyone can do. You can Google it. But it starts by you create your 10 to 25 year plan.
Oh, I see.
Personally, professionally, talk about the rituals. You really write everything out.
Wow, okay.
And then you break it down. Your 1 year, goal and plan, and then your 90-day. And I would say that that's helped me a lot. Just, reaching those smaller goals and smaller milestones, they all collectively add up to, a larger goal.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's actually a really great idea, because I think in my head I do that. Yes. But having written down, it's a different thing for sure.
And then the accountability piece is there too, because you have that document to reference and see where you're at.
Got it. That's awesome. Thank you for that tip. That's going to be helpful. So that's it. Thank you so much for all of that amazing information. I think there's going to be some really useful information for all of us to extract and try to apply to our own lives. Where can we find you? Where can everyone find you?
If you're on social, at Events by Aly, that's ALY, or alyarmstrong.co is my website.
alyarmstrong.co. And the podcast again is
Almost Married.
Almost Married.
If you go to my website, that's all. The link to the podcast is there.
Amazing. So thank you all again so much for watching and listening to another episode of the 2020 podcast. Again, please share it. Leave us a review and rate us on podcast app. And take a screenshot and throw it up on Instagram and let me know you're watching or listening. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again, and we'll see you back for the next episode.